Well, in my sermon this week, I was trying to push us towards this idea that when we come before God in prayer, we are coming before a God who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And what does it mean for us to come before that God in prayer? Well, it's this idea that we are kind of, in prayer, we're caught up into the life of the Trinity and the conversation that is already going on between the Father and the Son and the Spirit, a conversation about us and about our church. And that as we come in prayer, that we are being invited to come and participate in that divine conversation. And I think if we can grasp that, I think that changes quite dramatically our sense of what's going on as we come to God in prayer. I mean, it's intrinsically relational, isn't it? And it gives us, I think, a huge sense of humility. Like, we're not going to barge in that conversation and go, right, everybody be quiet. You all need to listen to me and what I got. No. We're going to come and we're going to listen to what's already being said in that conversation. And we're being invited to join in with that conversation and to speak into that conversation in a way that resonates with the agenda and with the priorities of what's already going on in that conversation between the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Now, Romans 8 isn't by any means the first time that we kind of come across this idea. In fact, if you go right back to the days of Moses and Aaron and the most ancient worship of the church, right back to the tabernacle, we see this all laid out for us very, very clearly. Now, I put a plan of the tabernacle and a picture of the tabernacle in a blog post so you can have a look at it and you can see visually what I'm going to try to describe to you now. You see, if you went into the tabernacle, what was the tabernacle? It was this tent that accompanied the people of God in their journeying through the wilderness. And at the center of the tabernacle was this rectangular structure, tent structure. And 2/3 of the way down, there was this veil that separated off the last third of this tent room. And in that last third was the Ark of the Covenant, the very throne of God, the God who sits enthroned between the cherubim. All right, and then on this side of the veil, as it were, you have the seven-branched lampstand that signifies and symbolizes the sevenfold Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit of the living God, who's shining his light on the table of the presence, the bread of the presence, which, of course, is about the Son. Okay? And so you've got here in this tabernacle the life and the ministry of the Trinity being laid out for us. Now, we looked a lot at this when we were going through Leviticus, so I don't want to revisit all of that. What I want to draw your attention to particularly is there's a fourth item of furniture in here, and it's the altar of incense. Now, what's that all about? Well, Revelation chapter 8, there's an extraordinary moment where there is silence in the courts of heaven. It's almost as if the Father is just being like, right, everybody quiet. Now, that's an extraordinary thing. I mean, just stop and think about everything that we are shown about the worship of heaven, because heaven is a noisy place. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's just this wave after wave of worship that just crashes against the throne of God and of the Lamb. Praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength, and the church triumphant and the angels and the living creatures, and they're all in this symphony of worship and adoration of God. And you think, whoa, well, what is so important that God silences the worship of heaven? Well, in Revelation 8, we're told it's the church at prayer. And that's that dynamic of the church at prayer is captured, is symbolized in the tabernacle by the altar of incense. We're told that in Revelation 8 as well. And the incense rising up off the altar is like this symbol of the prayers of God's people rising up before the throne of God. And the Father silences all else, that he can give his attention, so to speak, to the prayers of the people of God. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So here we have this altar of incense, which is the church, and the church at prayer. Now, there's two things that I want you to notice, all right, about where the altar of incense is. The first is that it's right up against the veil. You know, it stands right on the border of heaven itself. And you need to be careful saying this sort of thing, right? But there's a bit of me that thinks, man, is it possible that we are never closer to God than when we are in prayer? Now, you know, in the Bible, now through the death of Christ, that veil, as it were, has been torn down, and we're called to come boldly before the throne of grace. But I still think there's something very powerful for us to learn from the tabernacle, and to see the people of God in prayer as at the very edge of heaven itself. That's one thing. But the other thing is to see, again, where the altar of incense is. And it's right in the middle of the life of the Trinity. The church at prayer is right at the center of, you know, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I wouldn't be surprised to discover that that's actually the image that Paul has in mind as he's writing this theology of prayer in Romans chapter 8. And as he's thinking about the way in which the Spirit is praying through us, and the way in which the Son is mediating our prayer, and then interceding for us with the Father himself as well. And the Father who searches our hearts and who knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the Father's will. You know, and I think if we can get some of this stuff in place and dare to believe it, I think it might change so much about our experience of